The eviction notice lay on my kitchen table like a white flag I never agreed to raise. My son stood in the doorway, his wife watching from the shadows, and the word "Mom" came out like a lie wrapped in love. In that moment, I saw every lesson I'd ever taught about honesty and kindness turned against me. But I didn't cry. I just smiled, because this true-to-life story of family betrayal was about to become the greatest lesson in truth, strength, and the cost of greed. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. The words were short, clinical. Notice to vacate within 30 days. They could have written notice to disappear and meant the same thing. My home, the one I had paid for brick by brick, year by year, now belonged to a trust I never signed into existence. Daniel stood across from me, pale, guilty, still trying to look like the son I'd raised. "Mom, it's not what you think. Vanessa she got ahead of things. It's paperwork. We can fix it." Vanessa's voice slid in, smooth and careful. "It's just a formality, Evelyn. You'll still live here. Nothing changes day to day. The documents just streamline things." I let out a quiet laugh that surprised even me. Streamline. That's a fine word for stealing. Vanessa stiffened, but Daniel took a step forward, reaching for my shoulder. "We're not stealing. You don't understand how complicated it is. Taxes, liabilities, legal updates." "I understand enough," I said. "I understand that the house your father built, the one we poured our lives into, now bears your names instead of mine." Vanessa looked toward the window, her jaw tightening. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" I placed the paper flat on the table, smoothing the edge until it stopped shaking. "This notice didn't appear by accident. It came from the county, not your firm. That means someone filed a transfer." Daniel's silence confirmed everything. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock above the stove. The same clock that had marked every dinner, every birthday, every quiet morning since Daniel was a boy. Finally, Vanessa said, "You've lived here a long time, Evelyn. Maybe it's time to let someone else take care of things. You've worked hard enough." There it was, the poison wrapped in sugar. I'd heard that same tone from school administrators, the one that said, "We respect you, but your usefulness has expired." I stood. The chair scraped the floor softly, like a breath drawn before a storm. "Take care of things," I said. "You mean take control of them?" Daniel's eyes filled, torn between shame and the comfort of her approval. He didn't answer. "Mom, please," he whispered finally. "We thought we were helping." "You stopped thinking when you started listening to her," I said. "Help isn't something you do by erasing the person you claim to love." Vanessa drew a sharp breath, ready to defend herself. But I raised a hand. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just looked at her, the way I used to look at students caught cheating during exams, long enough for the silence to settle where it hurt most. "You've taken what you think you can," I said. "But you've miscalculated what's left." They left soon after. Daniel lingered in the doorway, waiting for me to ask him to stay. I didn't. Some lessons are learned only by walking out into the cold. When the door closed, the house sighed. It wasn't sorrow. It was relief. I stood at the table and traced the edge of the eviction notice with one finger. The fight hadn't started yet, but it would. And when it did, I wouldn't scream or beg or run. I would do what I'd done all my life. I would teach. But that fight was still far ahead of me then. Before the lies and the signatures, there was a classroom, a last bell, and the quiet beginning of the lesson I never knew I was teaching. That morning, I closed the door to room 12 for the last time. The light came in low and careful, as if it wanted to whisper goodbye without embarrassing either of us. Dust turned slow in the sun. The chalk tray held 3 stubs, white as old bones. I had meant to throw them away, but I couldn't quite do it. They were the ends of 1,000 beginnings. I stood at the board and touched the faint ghost of a sentence I had written every year on the first day. Character is what you do when no one is watching. The word character was still there in a smudge of stubborn gray. I liked that it refused to leave. I liked that the board kept a memory of what mattered. The hallway outside was already an echo. Summer would come and swallow the place in heat and silence. My keys were heavy in my palm. When I set them on the desk, the wood made a small, final sound. It was the kind of sound only someone who had listened to children for 40 years would hear. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the last of my things. A mug with a chip shaped like a crescent moon. A photo of my husband holding a kite while a cluster of 7th graders screamed with joy. He had been a tall man with the kind of smile that made you feel brave. He has been gone 7 years now, but in this picture he was forever catching the wind. I pressed my thumb to his sleeve and breathed. It would be easy to say I stayed in the classroom for the children, and that would be true. It would be easy to say I stayed because I could not imagine a day without the noise, and that would be true too. But there was something else. The room kept me from drifting. Every morning the bell rang and I knew who I was. A soft knock pulled me back. Rosa, the custodian who had watched 3 principals come and go without ever losing her calm, leaned in. "You sure you do not want help with those boxes, Miss Evelyn?" I smiled. "I can carry them, thank you." She came in anyway and took one. "You leave, and who is going to remind me to water the spider plant?" "You will. And you will forget twice and then remember. That is your rhythm." She laughed. We stood for a moment in the quiet, 2 women in a room that had taught both of us more than anyone would guess. She looked at the board and the sentence only I could still see. "You always wrote that," she said. "I always meant it." Rosa nodded once, serious. "It matters." After she left, I circled the room in a slow goodbye. The reading corner where a boy who insisted he hated books discovered he did not. The back table where a girl learned to breathe through her fear of fractions by drawing every problem as a garden bed. The window with the paint chip in the lower right corner that looked like a small bird in flight. I had told students it was a sign. They loved signs. I turned out the lights and then turned them back on. I needed one more pass. In the supply cabinet, I found the emergency chocolate I kept for bad days. I broke 1 square and let it melt on my tongue. The taste was faint and a little dusty. It made me laugh. Even the chocolate had learned restraint in this room. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Big dinner tonight? Vanessa found a new place downtown." "Celebrating you!" I stared at the exclamation point. Daniel had always used punctuation like confetti. Even when he was a boy, his notes were full of extra marks, as if he wanted joy to be visible. I loved that about him. A mother stores love the way a tree stores water, even through a long, dry season. I typed back, "That sounds lovely. What time?" His reply came fast. 7. Dress up a little. She wants photos for the page. The page meant the life Vanessa liked to curate. She worked at a firm with glass walls and young people who carried water bottles that told you how much to drink. She had a way of talking that made every sentence sound like a plan, and every plan sound like a promise. I did not dislike her. I did not trust her either. Both can be true. I sent a thumbs up and tucked the phone away. 7 hours until the new life with no bells, no roll call, no second chances scribbled in red. I felt light and also a little hollow. I do not think emptiness is the opposite of fullness. Sometimes it is a kind of readiness. The keys waited on the desk. I picked them up and curled my fingers around the metal. A small alarm beeped in the hall as the night setting armed itself for the first time without me in mind. I turned the knob and then stopped. In the top drawer, beneath the paper clips, a letter I had written to myself sat folded in half. I had forgotten it. I wrote it on a day when grief had eaten my lunch and my calm. The day a boy called me Mom by mistake and burst into tears. I unfolded it now. Dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means you are leaving. It means you stayed long enough to matter, and you are brave enough to go. Take your softness with you. Do not apologize for how you care. The world is not finished learning. I put the letter in my bag. I turned off the lights. I stepped into the hall and locked the door. Metal against metal. A clean click. The kind of closing that asks for no applause. In the parking lot, the air smelled like cut grass and the faint promise of rain. I put the boxes in the trunk and slid into the driver's seat. On the passenger side, the photograph of my husband watched me as he always did, steady and amused by my seriousness. Well, I said, here we are. On the way home, I took the long road by the river. The water was slow, high from spring rains, and the willow trees leaned into their own reflections. I do not know why people think reflections make you vain. Most of the time, they make you honest. My house waited in its patient way. White paint in need of a new coat. Porch swing with a sigh in the chain. A front door that stuck when it was humid. I had once listed these like burdens. Now they felt like a litany of blessings. I carried the boxes inside, set them on the dining table, and went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. The kettle had belonged to my mother. It wheezed and huffed and finally sang. I poured the water over 2 tea bags, because retirement deserved a stronger cup. While it steeped, I opened the mail. A flyer for roofing. A postcard from a former student now in the Navy. A white envelope from the pension office with my name typed in a font that looked tired. I put the envelope aside. I did not want the future to arrive between sips. I carried my tea to the living room and sat in my husband's chair. The cushion remembered him. If I closed my eyes, I could see his boots on the mat and hear the way he cleared his throat before he said anything important. He had been a man of few words and strong hands. The night before he died, he told me the only advice he had left. Trust the simple thing, Eve. People either keep faith or they do not. Do not lend them yours to spend. I had nodded, not because I understood, but because I wanted to believe I would. The doorbell rang. I set the tea down and went to the door. Daniel stood on the steps with a bouquet of white lilies. Vanessa hung back 2 steps, checking her phone and smiling at something I could not see. Congratulations, Mom, Daniel said. He moved in for a hug. He still smelled like laundry soap in summer, even in a suit. 40 years. That is a lifetime. It is, I said, and I let him hold me for a heartbeat longer than he expected. Vanessa stepped forward and kissed the air beside my cheek. We are so proud of you, she said. You must feel free. We have so many ideas for how to set you up for success. Success, I said. I suppose I will know it when I see it. She laughed in a bright way that made the lilies tremble. Can we come in? Daniel asked. Of course. I stood aside. Tea? None for me, Vanessa said. I have a call at 5:30. Quick check-in before the big dinner. But I wanted to make sure we talked timing. We booked a photographer for 7:45. The lighting at the restaurant is perfect then. Daniel set the flowers on the hall table and looked around, as if the house had changed since last week. After tonight, we should do a proper going away for the classroom. Maybe yard barbecue. Invite a few of your kids. My kids are 30 now with kids of their own, I said, and we all smiled at the exaggeration that was only half a lie. Vanessa walked to the living room and took a slow video of my husband's chair, the mantel, the framed quilts. This is gold, she said. Real life. People love real life. I did not say that real life was usually less shiny and more stubborn. I did not say that real life did not need a caption to be true. I only watched her move like a hostess through a home that was not hers. We also talked with our friend about the property tax adjustment, Daniel said. We think there is a smarter way to handle the house. Liability, protection, that sort of thing. We can take all the paperwork off your plate. Save you money. Keep things simple. He was trying to help. I saw that. He was also trying to run ahead of me the way he had as a boy when we crossed a street. I used to hold his hand and remind him to look both ways. He used to pull away. We can discuss it after dinner, I said. Perfect, Vanessa said. I will bring the documents so you do not have to think about it later. We will make it all seamless. Seamless is a word people use when they do not want you to see the seams. I felt my husband's chair behind me like a witness. Daniel touched my shoulder. Trust me, Mom, we will take care of you. I covered his hand with mine. I know you can, I said. The question is whether you will. He blinked, and for a moment I saw the boy who brought me dandelions with the roots still attached. He had loved entire then. I waited for him to answer. He only squeezed my shoulder and smiled, wide and earnest, a man who believed his own good intentions would be enough. They left soon after to change for dinner. The house settled into itself again, a gentle exhale. I took the lilies to the kitchen and found a vase. Their scent was clean and sharp, the kind of clean that does not come from soap, but from rain. I trimmed the stems and slid them into water. On the counter, the white envelope from the pension office waited. I opened it with a knife and read the page twice. It was a routine notice about an online account update, a new portal, a new password. Nothing alarming. Nothing at all. And yet I felt a thread pull deep inside my chest, a quiet tug. I folded the paper and put it with the others. I went back to my husband's chair and picked up my tea. It had cooled. I drank it anyway. Outside, the first drop of rain hit the porch roof and made a single punctuation mark in the afternoon. I thought of the board in room 12 and the sentence that refused to disappear. Character is what you do when no one is watching. I sat very still and watched myself. The restaurant Vanessa chose sat on the edge of downtown, a narrow building wrapped in glass and light. Inside, everything shimmered, cutlery catching reflections, music murmuring like conversation in another room. The hostess greeted Vanessa by name, which told me everything about the kind of place this was. I followed them to a corner table by the window. From there, I could see the slow crawl of traffic and, beyond it, the lights of the old theater where my husband had once taken me for our first anniversary. It had been a small-town evening of laughter and popcorn, and the comfort of knowing we were poor but happy. Tonight, everything around me seemed carefully rehearsed. Vanessa ordered champagne before we even opened the menus. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass toward me. To Evelyn finally getting to enjoy her freedom. Her smile was practiced, but her eyes sparkled with something else, a calculation I couldn't yet name. I smiled back. Freedom, I repeated softly. That's a beautiful word. Daniel clinked his glass against mine. You deserve it, Mom. You've worked hard all your life. You should be relaxing, traveling, enjoying what you built. No more stress. The champagne tasted too sweet. I swirled it, watching the bubbles rise and disappear. Stress isn't always the enemy, I said. It keeps a person sharp. A dull knife can't cut much of anything. Vanessa laughed lightly. Oh, you're still a teacher, even at dinner. But seriously, Evelyn, we want to help you simplify things. No more house repairs, no more worrying about bills. You've earned peace. Peace. Another beautiful word that hides so much work inside it. The waiter brought bread and small bowls of olive oil. I tore a piece and watched the golden oil spread like sunlight on the plate. I had taught so many children that patience is a form of power. Tonight I needed to practice it myself. That's kind of you both, I said. But what exactly do you mean by simplifying? Vanessa reached into her purse and took out a slim tablet. She swiped quickly and turned it toward me. It's simple, really? Daniel's business associate handles estate planning. He can consolidate everything, your house deed, the pension, your insurance, into a single family trust. It keeps everything tidy. Legally, it means if anything ever happens, we can manage things for you. Daniel nodded, his face earnest and a little tense. It's just smart planning, Mom. Everyone does it these days. I smiled gently. Everyone? That must be quite the crowd. He leaned forward. We just don't want you to have to deal with the stress. This way, you're protected. It's all about protecting you. Protected from what? I asked. Taxes, mainly, Vanessa said quickly. And liability. You never know what kind of accidents can happen when you own property. But in a trust, the house can't be touched. Except by the trustees, I said, almost to myself. Daniel reached for my hand. Mom, you trust us, don't you? Trust. It's such a small word for something that takes a lifetime to build. Of course, I said. I just like to understand what I'm signing. You know your father used to say I could never sign a form without reading the fine print twice. Vanessa's smile thinned. That's sensible. We'll bring everything by next week and go over it together. I promise. It's straightforward. Straightforward. Another word that often bends the truth. Dinner arrived. Grilled salmon for me, seared duck for Vanessa, and a steak so rare it seemed to breathe for Daniel. The plates looked like paintings, the kind of food designed to be admired before eaten. I found myself missing the comfort of a home-cooked meal. The kind of food that didn't need to be explained. As we ate, Vanessa began to talk about her job. She worked at a financial firm with an elegant name and a reputation she spoke of as if it were royalty. I listened quietly while she described quarterly projections and client portfolios. Daniel nodded as if he understood, though his eyes glazed over halfway through. When she mentioned a recent promotion, Daniel looked at her with pride that made me ache a little. He had once looked at me that way when he brought home his first report card with all A's. I remembered hanging it on the fridge, his grin wide and wild, his future still soft and full of promise. That's wonderful, I said. Congratulations. Vanessa beamed. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but it's paying off. Our firm handles some major accounts now. With the right investments, we'll be set for life. That's why I want to help you protect what you have. Family should take care of family. Indeed they should, I said quietly. She didn't catch the tone. A lull settled over the table. The music in the restaurant shifted to something slower. I looked around at the couples bent close over their meals, the laughter tucked between candle flames. There was beauty in it, but also a faint sadness. So many people chasing the image of happiness instead of its weight. Vanessa checked her phone. Excuse me, I need to handle something real quick, she said, already rising. Her heels clicked across the floor, the sound precise and final. When she was gone, Daniel sighed. She's just trying to help, Mom. She worries about you being alone. The house is a lot to manage. I've managed it for 30 years, I said. Your father and I kept that roof over our heads through strikes, layoffs, and one terrible winter when the pipes froze. We never asked for anyone's help. I know, he said. But things are different now. You shouldn't have to deal with the details. Let us handle the paperwork. It's the least we can do after all you've done for me. I studied him for a moment. His hairline had receded a little, and there were faint lines at the corners of his eyes. He was a man now, with worries of his own, but I could still see the boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the playground, the boy who once cried when he thought he had disappointed me. Daniel, I said softly, have you read the trust documents yourself? He hesitated. Not yet. Vanessa's handling most of it. She knows more about that stuff than I do. I see. He frowned slightly. You don't have to sound suspicious. I'm not suspicious. I'm careful. You learned that from me, remember? His face softened. I just want you to be happy. Then let me be careful, I said. Vanessa returned, her perfume sweeping in ahead of her. She smiled at Daniel, then at me, the kind of smile that photographs well. All settled, she said. No emergencies tonight. Now, where were we? You were explaining how you'd make my life simpler, I said. She laughed. Oh yes, that. We'll set everything up, and you won't have to lift a finger. You'll still live in the house, of course. Nothing changes. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork, I repeated. I've seen lives unravel over paperwork. Daniel reached for his drink, his hand unsteady. Vanessa touched his wrist lightly, a gesture meant to calm him that instead revealed control. We're all family here, she said sweetly. You trust us, don't you, Evelyn? The use of my first name felt like a test. I smiled and finished my champagne. Of course, I said. Family always trusts family. That's what makes betrayal possible. Her eyes flickered, and for a fraction of a second the mask slipped. Then she laughed, as if I'd told a joke. When the check came, she swept it up and placed her card inside. Our treat. You've given enough to the world. It's time to give back to you. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. The streetlights had come on, painting the pavement gold. Daniel hugged me tightly. Next week, he said, we'll bring everything by. You'll see, it's all very straightforward. Straightforward, I said, a word I've always liked. Vanessa linked her arm through his. 7 o'clock sharp, she said. I'll bring dinner and the papers. You can just relax and sign. No stress. She smiled once more before turning away, her laughter floating behind her like perfume. I stood there for a long moment, watching their silhouettes disappear into the night. A taxi honked. Somewhere down the street, a musician played a slow tune on a saxophone, notes drifting like memories through the damp air. On the drive home, I took the long way, the route by the river where the streetlights cast their reflections like coins tossed into the water. I had driven this way for years after late nights at the school, thinking about students who stayed in my mind long after they left my class. Some had written me letters years later. A few even visited. They had taught me as much as I had taught them, about trust, about choices, about how easily good intentions can turn into excuses. When I reached my street, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, cleansing. My house waited in its familiar stillness, the porch light glowing against the dark. I carried the lilies inside and set them on the kitchen counter. Their scent filled the room, sweet and sharp. I sat at the table and looked at the chair where my husband used to read the paper. I could almost hear him clearing his throat before offering some gentle opinion about the world. Well, I said quietly to the empty room, they've made their offer. The rain tapped at the windows like fingertips. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, low and patient. I reached for my notebook and wrote a single line on the first page. Lesson 1. Even love can come with terms and conditions. Then I closed the cover and sat very still, listening to the rain gather in rhythm, as if the sky itself were whispering a warning I would soon have to heed. They arrived on Tuesday at 7, right on time. The rain had cleared and left the neighborhood clean and quiet. I had set the table with a simple meal. Roasted chicken, green beans with lemon, and a bowl of buttered noodles the way Daniel had loved when he was small. Vanessa walked in carrying a white paper bag from a fashionable restaurant and kissed the air beside my cheek. We brought dessert, she said, a little celebration cake. Pistachio and rose. It is very on trend. Thank you, I said. Let me warm the plates. Daniel took the bag from her and then stood in the hallway as if he was not sure whether to help or wait for instructions. He looked around the house like a man who had been away longer than a week. The lilies still sat on the windowsill. Their water had clouded, and the blooms had gone soft at the edges. I did not change them out. Sometimes it is useful to let something beautiful show how quickly it spoils. We ate with the kind of careful politeness that makes conversation sound practiced. Vanessa praised the green beans. Daniel asked after my neighbor, who had broken her hip. I answered with short sentences and let the quiet stretch between us. I wanted to hear the silence. It tells the real story. After dinner, Vanessa set the small cake in the center of the table and pressed a tiny gold candle into the frosting. She lit it with a lighter the size of a pen. "Make a wish," she said. "Then we can get to the easy part." I looked at the candle. The flame was thin and disciplined. I closed my eyes and wished for courage that was not loud but steady. When I opened them, I blew the flame out and the room went soft for a moment in the small curl of smoke. Daniel clapped. Vanessa smiled and reached for her bag. "All right," she said, her tone light and professional. "Let us make your life simple." She set a neat stack of documents on the table. Each one wore a paperclip, like a small badge of authority. She placed a pen beside them. It was the same model we used to give to teachers for perfect attendance at the district luncheon. I wondered if she knew. "First, the living trust," she said, sliding the top packet toward me. "Daniel and I will be the trustees. You will be the beneficiary. This way you remain in the house without any of the stress. See, here. Paragraph 3 confirms your right to occupy the property for life. I read the sentence twice. The words were true, and yet they felt like a trick." She moved on without waiting for a question. "This addendum details the transfer of title," she said. "A quick claim from you to the trust. Standard form. And this one here authorizes us to manage the pension on your behalf. Automatic deposits will go into the trust account to be distributed to you monthly. It is cleaner that way. No overlap, no confusion." Daniel leaned forward. "We can pay your bills directly. Utilities, taxes, everything. You will never have to think about it again." "I like thinking," I said. Vanessa laughed. "Of course you do, but you have earned a break." I could hear my husband clearing his throat as if he wanted to interrupt. I imagined him at the end of the table, his reading glasses pushed up on his head, scanning line after line with the patience of a man who knew mistakes like to hide in plain sight. "Is there a copy I can keep?" I asked. "Absolutely," Vanessa said. She tapped the stack. "2 copies of everything, all prepared. I know you like order." "Who prepared them?" I asked. She named a law firm I did not recognize. The name sounded like 2 old families and a river. She said it quickly and looked past me as if the question was not the important part. "I asked because I will need their contact information for my records," I said. "Of course," she said again, too cheerfully. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Here, he is very good." "Is he your counsel or mine?" I asked. "Technically, he prepared the documents for the trust," she said. "But it is all very standard. Nothing complicated. Nothing important is ever simple." It was a sentence I used to write on the board during research season, when students wanted a single-page reference to do the work of a book. But this was not a classroom, and I did not need to teach her. I lifted the first page and read every line. I read the second page and the third. I did not hurry. The words were like stepping stones across a river. "You do not skip if you do not want to fall in." Vanessa shifted in her seat. "We have all night, of course," she said, her smile small and taut, "but the witness is waiting." "The witness," I said. She gestured toward the front door. "Our friend Marco. He is a notary. He can stamp everything tonight, so you do not have to make a second appointment." "That is convenient," I said. Daniel sat back, relieved. "See, Mom? We thought of everything." I kept reading. The trust gave them broad powers to manage, invest, and dispose. The addendum gave them discretion over distributions. The property transfer was immediate. The pension authorization allowed redirection of funds. The language was neat and clean, a kind of careful velvet that muffles sound. "Here," Vanessa said, pointing. "This clause guarantees residency. You keep the right to live here no matter what." "No matter what" sounds large, I said. "Is there a clause that guarantees I keep ownership in some form? A reversion, perhaps, if you no longer wish to serve as trustees?" Daniel frowned. "A reversion?" Vanessa cut in with a smooth voice. "That is not standard. If we add that, it defeats the purpose of a trust. It complicates tax treatment." "Complications keep people honest," I said. She folded her hands. "Evelyn, we are doing this for you. We are trying to protect you. We love you." I met her eyes and held them there. Love is not a substitute for clarity. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, please do not make this hard." "I am reading," I said. "That is not hard. It is careful." Vanessa sighed and sat back. "We can sit here all night, but nothing will change. The forms are correct. We brought a notary. Your interests are covered. Let us just sign and celebrate. You will feel better once it is done." I lifted my tea and took a slow sip. I could feel the ghost of chalk dust in my throat. For a moment I saw the board in room 12 with the sentence I had written on the first day of school for decades. "Character is what you do when no one is watching." For the first time I wondered if I had also been writing a note to myself. I set the cup down and asked the question that had been walking circles in my mind. "Who is the beneficiary after I die?" Vanessa answered too quickly. "The trust remains in place for Daniel and any children we may have. So the house and the remaining pension funds would pass to you as trustees. You would own the decisions entirely." "Yes," she said, then corrected herself with a smile. "We would manage with respect for your wishes." "What are my wishes in these documents?" I asked. She lifted a hand. "The usual. Your comfort, your care, your ability to remain in the house." "We would see to all that." "That is not a wish," I said. "That is a season. Wishes are specific." The room felt smaller than it had half an hour ago. I thought of my husband and the way he would stand when a conversation needed truth. Not angry, not loud, just present. I closed the folder and pushed it an inch away. "I will sign the residency guarantee," I said. "I will sign an authorization for you to pay routine bills from my monthly pension. I will not sign a property transfer tonight." Daniel stared at me as if I had spoken in a language he did not know. "Mom, we talked about this. We said we would handle everything." "I heard you," I said. He looked to Vanessa. She sat very still and measured me with care. For a moment I saw the steel under her charm. Then she smiled again, easy and bright. "Of course," she said. "We can split this into stages. Why not? We are flexible." She gathered the transfer documents with a quick movement and set them aside, leaving the residency letter and the payment authorization on the table like harmless cousins. The notary card waited beside them, square and quiet. "I can sign those tonight," I said, "but I will have my attorney review the rest." "You have an attorney," Daniel said, surprised. "Every teacher needs one," I said. "We swim in paperwork from the first day to the last." Vanessa nodded without looking at him. "That is fine. We can proceed with these and revisit the others later." "Marco is still here. Should I let him in?" I glanced at the window. A car idled at the curb. A man sat behind the wheel, shoulders squared, gaze on his phone. Patience in a suit. I folded the 2 pages and tapped them against the table in a rhythm that matched my pulse. "Let him in," I said. The notary came in with the humble eagerness of someone who wants to be invisible but also indispensable. He smiled and shook hands and set a small stamp on the table like a toy. He checked my identification, recorded numbers, asked me to raise my right hand, and affirmed that I was who I said I was. There is a strange holiness to bureaucracy when it insists you tell the truth about your own name. I signed the residency letter. I signed the authorization that allowed them to pay my routine bills from a monthly distribution. I signed nothing that moved ownership anywhere but where it already lived. Marco stamped both pages with a crisp sound that reminded me of a bell. Then he slid the documents back to Vanessa. She smiled the way people do when they believe victory can be portioned out in courses. "Wonderful," she said. "I will file these first thing in the morning." She turned to Daniel. "We are making progress." He exhaled and smiled at me. "Thank you, Mom. You will see. This will make life easier." "Easier is not our goal," I said. "Honest is our goal." Marco left with a nod and a promise to send a second copy with his seal. Vanessa wrapped the cake again and placed it in my refrigerator without asking. She moved through my kitchen as if she had already mapped every drawer and shelf in her mind. "Next steps," she said, cheerful again. "We will schedule time with the law firm so you feel comfortable with the rest. And we will get your pension portal updated. There is a new security system. I can help you log in tonight if you like." I saw the door that invitation opened. I smiled gently and closed it. "I will manage," I said. "I like to keep my passwords where only I can find them." She tilted her head, as if I had told a charming secret. "Of course." Daniel walked them to the door and then turned back to hug me. He held on too tight for a second, the way he did when he was a boy and had fallen off his bike but did not want to cry. I rubbed his back once, slow and steady. "You know I would never do anything to hurt you," he said into my shoulder. "I know what you want to believe," I said. "I also know what ink can do." He pulled back with a look I could not read. Regret and resolve and a little fear all at once. Vanessa stood on the porch smiling at the street. "We will call you tomorrow," she said. "Sleep well." When the door closed, the house released a breath. I gathered the remaining documents and carried them to my husband's desk. The desk had been his sanctuary. Now it was mine. I set the folders beside the lamp and opened the drawer where we kept a small leather binder of old paperwork, title records, insurance. A few letters from years ago, tied with a ribbon that had faded to a gentle brown. At the back of the drawer, beneath the file where we kept our wills, was a thin envelope with my name written in my husband's hand. I had forgotten it. He must have tucked it there in those last months when he was trying to put our life in order. I did not open it, not yet. Some doors should wait for a quieter hallway. I returned to the kitchen and washed the plates with slow attention. Warm water, a single drop of soap, the clean slip of porcelain under my fingers. Through the window, the street looked washed and new. The lilies on the sill leaned toward the glass as if they wanted to listen. When the dishes were done, I made tea and carried it to the living room. I sat in his chair and opened my notebook. Lesson 2. A signature is a door you cannot close. Ask who holds the key. I closed the book and placed it on the side table. Then I reached for the envelope with my husband's handwriting and held it against my palm. The paper was smooth and familiar. I could almost hear his voice. "Trust the simple thing," he had said. "People either keep faith or they do not. Do not lend them yours to spend." I put the envelope back in the drawer. I would read it when I was ready to hear everything in it. I turned off the lights and walked the house one room at a time. I touched the dining table where a lifetime of meals had been set and cleared. I straightened the photograph on the mantel of a younger me and a younger him on a beach, wind in our hair, sand on our knees. I checked the back door and the front. I stood for a quiet minute in the hall that held the marks where Daniel had grown, and I had tallied his height in pencil year by year. The highest line was just below my shoulder. In the bedroom, I opened the window to let in the night air. A breeze moved the curtains. I lay down and watched the shadows shift on the ceiling. Somewhere, a car door closed. A dog barked twice and fell silent. My mind walked through the documents again, step by careful step, and then came to rest on the clause that looked protective and felt like a promise with a string attached. I closed my eyes and let the room darken around me. I thought of chalk on my fingers and the low hum of a classroom just before the bell. I thought of the notary's stamp and the way the sound echoed in my chest like a warning. I thought of the envelope in the drawer and the way paper can hold a person long after the body is gone. The last thought I had before sleep took me was simple and steady. There would be a lesson at the end of this. I only hoped I would still recognize myself when it arrived. The envelope came 3 weeks later, tucked between a grocery flyer and a church bulletin. It was thin, official, and printed with a logo I had not seen before. The return address said Regional Loan Services. I had never applied for a loan in my life. I almost set it aside, thinking it was junk, but something about the font, too clean, too certain, made me pause. I carried it to the kitchen, put on water for tea, and opened it with the small knife I kept for envelopes. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were polite, but cold. Notice of transfer. The document said the mortgage associated with my property had been reassigned under a new account number. It thanked the new owners for their prompt cooperation. The kettle began to whistle. I didn't move. My eyes stayed on that phrase. The new owners. I read it again, slower this time. The date on the letter was a week after Daniel and Vanessa had visited. The whistle grew louder until it became unbearable. I turned off the burner, poured water over the tea bag, and watched the steam rise. I stirred until the spoon touched the side of the cup, then left it there, trembling slightly from my hand. I folded the letter twice and set it on the table beside the lilies, now wilted and brown at the edges. Their scent had gone sour. I thought of Vanessa's voice saying, "It's just paperwork." I thought of Daniel's hand shaking as he told me he would never hurt me. After a long time, I picked up the phone. "Good morning," said the voice on the other end, cheerful and unaware. "Regional Loan Services. How may I assist you?" "Yes," I said carefully. "I received a letter about a mortgage transfer. I believe there has been a mistake." "Certainly. May I have your property address?" I gave it. There was a pause while she typed. I heard keys clicking, the faint hum of a machine in the background. "Ma'am," she said after a moment, "I do see an active account, but it's not in your name. Are you Mrs. Evelyn Hale?" "Yes." "It looks like ownership transferred last month to the Hale Family Trust. You're listed as the occupant, not the owner." "Occupant?" I repeated. The word tasted metallic. "And the trust? Who are the trustees?" One moment. Another pause, longer this time. "It says Daniel Hale and Vanessa Hale." I let out a breath that wasn't quite a sound. "Would you like me to send a copy of the documentation we received?" "Yes," I said. "Send everything you have." I gave her my address, thanked her for her help, and hung up. My tea had gone cold. The cup left a wet ring on the table, and I did not wipe it away. I sat there for several minutes, looking at the lilies. Then I took the whole vase to the sink and poured it out. The stems landed with a hollow sound in the trash bin. That afternoon, I walked to the bank. The air was heavy, with the smell of rain on hot concrete. My husband and I had opened our first joint account in that same building 40 years earlier. The same brass handles, the same marble floor, but everything else had changed. New faces, new systems, new ways to forget old promises. The young teller looked up with a professional smile. "How can I help you today?" I handed her the letter. "I need to know what this means." She read it, her smile fading slightly. "I'll get our branch manager for you, ma'am." A few minutes later, a man in a navy suit came out, his tie slightly askew. His nameplate said Mr. Denton, He was polite in the way people are when they know bad news is coming. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "why don't we step into my office?" We sat across from each other at a desk that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. He read the letter, nodding slowly. "Yes, this would indicate that the deed was transferred into a trust. Your son and daughter-in-law are the primary trustees, is that correct?" "So it seems," I said. "Did you sign any documents authorizing that transfer?" "I signed a residency agreement and a bill payment authorization," I said. "Not a property transfer." He gave me a sympathetic look that told me he had seen this before. "Mrs. Hale, I'm afraid the title record we received does show a deed transfer, filed with the county office. It was notarized and processed electronically. That's likely how the mortgage was reassigned." "May I have a copy of that record?" "Of course," he said. "It's public information. But if you believe the transfer was done under false pretenses, you'll want to contact an attorney immediately." I smiled faintly. "Yes, I believe I will." He printed a few pages, stapled them neatly, and handed them to me with quiet respect. When I walked out, the air had grown darker. The sky was the color of old steel. I stopped under the awning and looked down at the pages. There, in black ink, were Daniel's and Vanessa's signatures. Clear, confident, certain. Below them was mine. I looked at it for a long time. It was my signature. But the date was not the night of our dinner. It was 3 days later. Someone had copied it, perhaps scanned from another document. Or perhaps the notary had stamped papers I never saw. The thought made me dizzy. I steadied myself against the railing, breathing through my nose until the trembling passed. I had taught children to face the truth, no matter how hard it looked on paper. Now it was my turn. When I got home, I brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat at the kitchen table with the deed copy, the bank letter, and a pen. I made a list. I had always believed lists could turn chaos into order. 1. Contact attorney. 2. Review trust documents. 3. Verify pension account. 4. Call county office. 5. Speak with Daniel. I stopped at the 5th item and underlined it. I wasn't sure what I would say when I called. There are conversations that require courage, and there are others that require restraint. I wasn't sure which this would be. The phone rang before I could decide. It was Daniel. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Vanessa told me you got a letter from the bank." "I did," I said evenly. "They seem to think I'm a guest in my own home." He sighed. "It's just paperwork, Mom. The trust handles the property now, remember? Nothing changes for you. You still live there. Everything's fine." "Everything's fine," I repeated. "Then why did the mortgage change names without my consent?" "Because that's how trusts work. It's all automatic." Vanessa explained it to the accountant. "It's safer this way." "For whom?" There was a pause. "For all of us," he said finally. "Look, Mom, Vanessa's firm is restructuring. She's been under a lot of pressure. She just wants to make sure we're all secure." "Secure," I said. "That's one word for it. Don't start this," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "You're overreacting. You signed the papers. Everything we've done is legal." "I'm sure it is," I said softly. "Legality and morality often part ways at the courthouse door," he groaned. "Mom, please. We're doing this for you. I thought you understood that." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You and Vanessa have chosen what you believe is best. Now I'll do the same." Before he could answer, I ended the call. The rain started again, tapping against the windows. I took the envelope with my husband's handwriting from the drawer where I had left it and sat at the table. I unfolded it slowly. His handwriting was strong, even in his final months. "Eve, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have time to say everything I wanted. I know you'll look after Daniel. He's good-hearted, but he'll need reminding that goodness requires work. If anything ever happens, check the records for Hale Industries. You'll know what I mean. There was no signature, just a small sketch of a kite in the corner. It was how he signed birthday cards when Daniel was little. Hale Industries. I whispered the words out loud. My husband had been an early investor. Back when the company was just a small education supply firm run by one of his former students. He put in a modest amount, enough that we joked about being business owners. We never thought it would matter. I looked again at the list on the table and added one more line. 6. Call Hale Industries. Outside, the rain grew harder. The house seemed to lean into the sound, waiting for what came next. I folded the letter and placed it beside the deed copy. Then I poured another cup of tea and watched the steam rise until it blurred the world beyond the window. There are moments when the ground beneath you shifts, not with violence, but with quiet certainty. You realize the life you thought you knew has been moving under you all along. That was the moment I stopped being a teacher and began becoming something else. Someone who was about to teach a different kind of lesson. I waited 3 days before calling, long enough to let the shock turn into something sharper, something I could hold without shaking. I used that time the way I used to prepare before parent conferences, gathering facts, copies, and quiet composure. When Daniel finally agreed to meet, his voice sounded tired. "Maybe you can come by our place," he said. "Vanessa's been swamped, but she can step away for a bit." "I think it would be better if you both came here," I said. "We'll have more privacy." He hesitated. "Sure. Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow at noon." When I hung up, the air in the house felt expectant, like the moment before a storm when everything pauses to listen. I took my husband's letter from the drawer and read it again, tracing the small sketch of the kite. He had always believed Daniel would grow into a man of character. I wanted to believe that too. But belief is only the seed. Choice is the soil. The next morning, I baked a loaf of bread. It wasn't for comfort. It was for control. The steady rhythm of kneading, the measured rise, the warm scent filling the kitchen. It reminded me that patience, properly tended, becomes strength. At noon, the doorbell rang. Daniel stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets, eyes downcast. Vanessa lingered behind him, sunglasses perched on her head, even though the sky was overcast. Her smile was crisp, professional. "Mom," Daniel said softly. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside, and the familiar smell of the house seemed to vanish under Vanessa's perfume. I gestured toward the dining table. The deed papers, the bank letter, and a copy of the notary record were neatly stacked beside the teapot. Vanessa glanced at them, then looked up at me. "You've been busy," she said. "I've always believed in doing my homework," I said. "You remember that from school, Daniel?" He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please tell me you didn't go to the bank making a scene." "I didn't make a scene. I asked questions." "And?" "And I learned that the house is no longer mine." Vanessa crossed her arms. "It's in the family trust. That's what we agreed on. What you said was that I would retain residency. What you did was file a transfer of ownership I never authorized. My name is on those forms, but not in ink I recognize." Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "It was an oversight. The documents were processed electronically. Maybe the notary duplicated your signature for convenience." "For convenience," I said. "A very useful word. It often stands beside deceit, holding its hand." Daniel leaned forward. "Mom, stop talking like a teacher. This isn't one of your moral lessons. It's just business." "No," I said quietly. "It's not business. It's trust." He looked away. The silence that followed was the kind that grows teeth. Vanessa shifted her weight. "Look, I know this is confusing, but everything we did was legal. You're still living here. Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," I said. "You've taken what your father and I built with a lifetime of work and turned it into leverage." And you did it with a smile. Her tone sharpened. You're being dramatic. We've spent hours making sure your accounts are secure, your property protected. You should be thanking us. I turned the deed copy toward them. You think protection means possession. It doesn't. It means responsibility, the kind you both have forgotten. Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. What do you want from us? You think we're stealing from you? We're trying to help you. Help me by taking my name off the house? By redirecting my pension payments? Tell me, Daniel, how does that help me? His mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa touched his arm. This isn't productive, she said. Let's not turn this into a scene. I'm not the one performing, I said. You are. Her eyes narrowed. You don't understand how the world works anymore. Everything is managed through trusts, through accounts. You can't cling to the past forever. I'm not clinging to the past. I'm protecting what's right. There's a difference. She sighed, exasperated. Fine, if this is about control, keep your name on everything. But don't come crying to us when the taxes overwhelm you, or the pension freezes, or... I raised my hand. Enough. The pension doesn't worry me. Her voice lowered. It should. That system is outdated. You'll need us to handle the transition eventually. I doubt that, I said. Especially since your company already handles several pension accounts, including mine. Her expression changed instantly. Just a flicker, but enough. How would you know that? She asked too quickly. I let the question hang in the air. Your firm's name appears on the back end of the account statements. I read everything, Vanessa, even the footnotes. Daniel frowned. Mom, why are you talking like this? You sound like you're accusing us of something. I met his eyes, calm and steady. Because I am, Vanessa straightened. That's absurd. Then it shouldn't bother you. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I looked at Daniel, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. He was lost, pulled between loyalty and comfort, between the mother who raised him and the woman who guided his every step. Daniel, I said softly, I don't believe you started this. But you let it happen. That's worse. You've let someone else use your good heart as a mask for greed. He looked down at his hands. Do you know what your father used to tell his students? I asked. He'd say, integrity isn't what you show the world, it's what you refuse to trade. You traded yours for convenience. Vanessa snapped. This is ridiculous. We don't have to sit here and be insulted. She grabbed her purse. Come on, Daniel. He didn't move. Daniel, she said again, sharper this time. He looked at me, then at her. She deserves answers. She's delusional, Vanessa said. You know how emotional she gets. I rose from my chair. I may be emotional, but I'm not blind. I know what you're doing at that firm, Vanessa. That got her attention. Her face went very still. What are you talking about? Embezzlement, I said quietly. Redirected payments. Fabricated invoices. I know. She blinked, her poise cracking. You don't know anything. Maybe not everything, I said, but I know enough, and I know that the pension accounts you're managing are part of that same system. Including mine. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her pulse fluttered in her throat. How? She whispered. I didn't answer. The truth was still half-formed, but I could feel it under the surface, waiting. My husband's letter had pointed me toward something bigger than family betrayal, and now I had confirmation that the rot went deeper than our home. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. I taught children to own their mistakes. That lesson doesn't stop when you grow up. It only gets louder. Vanessa grabbed her purse and turned to Daniel. We're leaving. He hesitated, torn. I spoke softly. Daniel, before you walk out that door, remember this moment. Remember who stayed calm when the truth came out. He looked at me, eyes wet, then followed her. The front door shut with a final sound. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet settle into my bones. Then I sat back down and reached for the bread knife. I cut a slice from the loaf I had baked that morning, spread it with butter, and took a slow bite. The taste was simple, honest, the kind of thing that didn't need explanation. Then I opened my notebook and wrote, Lesson 3. When people show you who they are, believe them. But never stop believing in who you still can be. I set down my pen and looked at the empty doorway. The house felt steady again, as if it had been holding its breath. Outside, the sky was beginning to clear. A single shaft of sunlight fell across the table, touching the pages, the teacup, the place where Vanessa's hand had rested. It was time to find out exactly what my husband had meant when he wrote those words. Check the records for Hale Industries, because I had a feeling the next lesson would not be mine alone to teach. The morning after their visit, I woke before dawn. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself had been holding its breath all night. I boiled water, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the letter my husband had written. The ink had faded slightly at the edges, but the words still carried his calm authority. Check the records for Hale Industries. You'll know what I mean. For years, that phrase would have meant nothing. My husband's small investment had been more sentiment than ambition, a gesture of faith in one of his former students who had dreamed of building a company that would make learning beautiful. Hale Industries had started by designing educational materials, then expanded into software, training programs, even financial services for schools and teachers. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same company that had once supplied chalk to my classroom now handled pension accounts like mine. I finished my tea, dressed, and gathered every document related to the pension. I placed them in a canvas tote, along with the letter. Then I drove to the city library. The building was quiet, still scented faintly with paper and time. I'd spent half my life here grading essays at long wooden tables, surrounded by whispers and the soft hum of computers. The librarian, a young man with kind eyes, smiled when he recognized me. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "we miss you around here. Research again?" "In a way," I said. "I need public filings for a company. Hale Industries. Everything available." He nodded and pointed me toward the digital archives. "Search under corporate disclosures and investment histories. They've grown fast lately." That last word, lately, hung in the air as I thanked him. I logged in, typed the name, and waited for the page to load. Within seconds, the company's structure appeared on the screen. Subsidiaries, board members, shareholder reports. My husband's name was listed among the founding investors. His ownership small, but still valid. My name, too, appeared as joint heir, a silent partner. That meant I still had legal standing. I printed the records, then kept searching. Board changes, quarterly audits, legal disputes. A recent notice caught my eye, an internal audit triggered by irregularities in the financial reporting of subsidiary accounts. The date was 2 months ago. The firm managing those accounts was listed as Vanessa's employer. I sat back in the chair, letting the pieces begin to click into place. Vanessa had been moving funds through that firm, likely siphoning money from pension accounts like mine into shell subsidiaries. And because my pension was part of the same system, it meant she was stealing from me and from hundreds of other retired teachers. For a long moment, I stared at the screen and felt an unexpected calm settle over me. Not relief, not anger, just clarity. It was the same feeling I used to get when a student finally understood a lesson they'd been struggling with for weeks. The noise quieted. The truth took shape. I printed everything: ownership certificates, audit memos, the chain of management, and slipped the pages into a folder. As I left, the librarian smiled. "Find what you needed?" "I think I found what I was supposed to," I said. That afternoon, I called one of my former students, Clara Benson. She had been one of my brightest, sharp, curious, and kind to everyone who wasn't kind to her. She was a corporate attorney now, working for a firm that handled ethics and compliance cases. When she answered, her voice was warm. "Mrs. Hale, I can't believe it's you. How are you?" "Older and a little wiser," I said. "I think I've stumbled across something I shouldn't ignore." Her tone shifted instantly. "Tell me what's going on." I told her everything. The trust, the forged signature, the redirected pension, and the connection to Hale Industries. I kept my voice steady, factual, like I was giving a lecture. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "That's serious," she said finally. "If your daughter-in-law is involved in an active audit, this could turn criminal. Do you have proof?" "I have company records, pension documents, and my husband's letter. I also have a bank notice listing the trust as the new owner of my home." "Bring everything to me," she said. "Tomorrow morning. We'll start there. I can run a background check on her firm and request the audit file from the board." "Thank you, Clara. You were always good at finding what others wanted hidden." She laughed softly. "You taught me that secrets only survive in silence. We'll get to the truth." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. The next day, I met Clara in her office downtown. She was taller than I remembered, confident in a quiet way that didn't need to prove itself. Her walls were lined with law books and photographs of the legal aid work she did in her spare time. "Let's see what we've got," she said, spreading my papers across the desk. She read for nearly an hour, taking notes, cross-referencing filings on her laptop. Occasionally she murmured something, dates, figures, codes, half to herself. Finally, she sat back and looked at me. "Vanessa's firm has been under investigation for 3 months," she said. "They found discrepancies between reported assets and actual balances. Several pension accounts show unverified transfers, including yours. Whoever authorized those transfers did it under trustee authority." "Meaning Daniel's name is on them too," I said. "Yes, but it's possible he didn't know what was happening. These things are often engineered by someone with inside access and financial control." "Vanessa?" Clara nodded. "If we can show that she used the trust to redirect funds or cover losses, she's in deep trouble. And since you're still a silent partner in Hale Industries, you have standing to initiate an internal review. That's a powerful position." The thought surprised me. I had spent my life working within small classrooms, believing that my influence ended at the edge of a chalkboard. But here, in this sleek office full of glass and quiet authority, I realized I still had power. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that acts. "What happens next?" I asked. "I'll contact the company's compliance division and the board's audit committee," she said. "If we present this properly, they'll open a formal inquiry. Keep everything documented. Don't confront your son or daughter-in-law yet. Let the system do the work." I nodded. "The system," I said softly. "You know, I used to tell my students that justice is just truth with patience." Clara smiled. "Then let's be patient." She stood and took my hand. "Mrs. Hale, you once told me that the world doesn't need louder people. It needs steadier ones. I think you're about to prove that again." That evening, back home, I sat at my husband's desk and opened my notebook. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the street lamps cast soft halos on the wet pavement. I wrote, Lesson 4. When the people you love betray you, don't match their deceit. Match their certainty with truth. I closed the notebook and placed it beside the folder of evidence. On top of it, I laid my husband's letter. For the first time since this began, I felt his presence not as memory, but as direction. The man who had once built this home with his hands had also left me the tools to protect it. I turned off the lamp, the room falling into a gentle half-dark. Through the window, the willow tree in the yard swayed in the night breeze, its long branches moving like old memories. Tomorrow would begin something larger than a family dispute. Tomorrow, the lessons I had spent a lifetime teaching were about to find their final classroom, and this time, the students would be Daniel and Vanessa. Clara called early the next morning. Her voice was calm but carried that subtle energy that means things are starting to move. "Evelyn," she said, "I think we've found what we needed. Can you come to the office this afternoon?" I agreed and spent the morning walking the garden behind my house. The soil was damp, the air still cool from night rain. I trimmed the roses the same way my husband used to, talking softly to them as if they were students who needed encouragement. It steadied me. By the time I locked the gate, I was ready for whatever truth waited behind Clara's door. The office smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Clara greeted me with a folder thick enough to suggest trouble. She motioned me toward a chair and began without ceremony. "I spoke with the audit committee," she said. "They confirmed irregular transfers from multiple teacher pension accounts into what appeared to be a subsidiary account controlled by Vanessa's firm. The amounts were small at first, rounded numbers that would go unnoticed, but over time they grew. The same account received funds from the Hale Family Trust. That's where your pension has been going since the redirection." I felt a stillness move through me. So the trust wasn't just a way to take my home. It was a pipeline. Exactly. And your daughter-in-law's digital signature authorizes each transaction. She routed everything through her corporate credentials. That's fraud on 2 levels: corporate embezzlement and misappropriation of a fiduciary trust. I nodded slowly. "And Daniel?" Clara looked down at her notes. "His name appears on the trust, but there's no evidence he participated. Every transfer was executed from Vanessa's login. If this proceeds legally, he could be charged as an accessory unless he cooperates." "He'll cooperate," I said. She looked up, studying my face. "You sound certain." "I know my son. He lost his way, but not his conscience. Once he sees what she's done, he'll understand." Clara leaned back in her chair. "Then it's time to decide how you want to move forward. We can take this directly to the board of Hale Industries. If they act quickly, the company will freeze the accounts before Vanessa can destroy evidence. But once the audit expands, this will be public. Your family's name will be in the reports." "I don't care about the embarrassment," I said. "I care about the truth. And I want every dollar stolen from those teachers restored." Clara smiled faintly. "You're still teaching, aren't you?" "It's the only thing I know how to do." She slid a document toward me. "This form authorizes me to represent you as a shareholder and whistleblower. Once you sign, I can initiate the review." I signed my name carefully, each letter deliberate. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine for a moment. "You're doing the right thing, Evelyn." "I'm doing the necessary thing," I said. On the drive home, I thought about Daniel. I needed to speak to him before the world did. The truth should come from me. His car was already in my driveway when I pulled in. He stood on the porch, his expression uncertain. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "Mom," he said when I stepped out, "we need to talk." "Yes, we do," I said. Inside, I poured him tea and waited. He stared at his hands. "Vanessa said you've been asking questions. She's worried you're going to make things worse for everyone." "Everyone," I repeated. "Or just her?" He sighed. "She told me about the audit at work. She said people are out to make her look guilty. They're jealous. It's politics. She's lying to you, Daniel." He looked up, hurt flashing in his eyes. "You don't know that." "I do," I said quietly. "I've seen the records. I met with a lawyer. The money missing from my pension and others went through her accounts. Every transaction bears her signature. This isn't jealousy, it's theft." He shook his head. "No, she wouldn't." "She did. I handed him a folder with the copies Clara had given me. He opened it and began to read. I watched his face change as he turned each page. The color drained from his cheeks. "I didn't know," he said finally. "She told me it was all routine. She said the trust was just a legal step. She used your name to make it look legitimate. You helped her without realizing it." He rubbed his face with both hands. "God, Mom, what have I done?" "You've made a mistake," I said gently. "That's all. But mistakes stop being accidents when you keep them secret. You can still do what's right." He looked at me with the frightened clarity of a child who suddenly sees the lesson in full. "What happens to her? That depends on what happens next. The company will act soon. You can tell them what you know and help repair the damage. Or you can protect her and lose yourself in the process." He dropped his head. "She'll hate me." "She already does," I said softly. "Anyone who steals from people who trusted them doesn't love anything but power. And love without truth isn't love at all." He was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth. Everything you know. And when the board contacts you, cooperate fully." He nodded slowly, then met my eyes. "Will you stand by me when it all comes out?" "Of course. I'm your mother. I'll stand by the part of you that's good. The rest will have to answer for itself." He swallowed hard and nodded again. "I'll go to them. Today." "Good," I said. "Let the truth start from our house for once." He left soon after, walking to his car like a man carrying something heavy but necessary. I watched him drive away, then sat on the porch, listening to the soft rustle of the willow tree in the yard. That evening, Clara called again. Her tone was brisk, businesslike. "Evelyn, the board has reviewed the evidence. They've suspended Vanessa pending a full investigation. Law enforcement will be notified tomorrow. The accounts are frozen. You did it." I closed my eyes for a moment and let the words settle. "What about the pensions?" "They'll be restored once the audit's complete. It'll take time, but the system will correct itself. You'll get your home back too. The trust will dissolve under fraud provisions." "Thank you," I said. "You earned this outcome," she replied. "You were patient. You were right. After we hung up, I sat alone for a while. I didn't feel victorious. Justice rarely feels that way. It felt quiet. It felt exact. When the first evening stars appeared, I opened my notebook. Lesson 5. Truth does not shout. It waits, steady and calm, until someone strong enough decides to listen. I set the pen down and looked toward the street. A car slowed in front of the house, hesitated, then drove away. I knew who it was. Daniel, watching from a distance, making sure I was safe. He was beginning to learn. The next lesson would belong to him. I woke the next morning to silence. The kind that feels deliberate, as if the world is waiting for news. Outside, the air was heavy with the promise of rain again. I poured coffee instead of tea. The bitterness seemed right for the day. By mid-morning, the phone began to ring. First Clara, then one of the other retired teachers from the neighborhood. Then another. Word was spreading. Hale Industries had issued a public statement. The audit had expanded into a criminal investigation. Vanessa's name appeared in every report. When Clara called back, her voice carried both satisfaction and restraint. "They moved fast," she said. "Vanessa was arrested this morning. The company's compliance officers met law enforcement at her office. They took files, computers, and several accounts are now under forensic review." I stood by the window, watching the willow bend in the wind. "And Daniel? He met them voluntarily," she said. "He confirmed everything. His cooperation means he won't face charges. He also signed an affidavit supporting your ownership claim. The trust will be dissolved by the end of the week." The words settled over me like steady rain. I thought I might feel triumphant, but I didn't. What I felt was the quiet exhaustion that comes after a long truth finally lands. "Thank you, Clara," I said. "You've done more than I could have asked." "You did most of it," she said gently. "You kept faith with yourself when they thought they'd taken it away." After she hung up, I stood for a while longer, looking out at the yard. The willow swayed as if it understood something about bending without breaking. Around noon, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He sat for a few minutes before getting out. When he finally knocked, it was a hesitant sound. I opened the door. He looked thinner, older somehow, his face drawn. He was carrying a small box. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was low. "May I come in?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside. He placed the box on the kitchen table and sat down. For a long time, he said nothing. I waited. Patience is the one lesson I never stopped practicing. "She's gone," he said at last. "They took her away this morning. Reporters were outside the house. I didn't even pack a bag. I just left." "You did the right thing," I said. "I don't feel like I did." He rubbed his eyes. "I keep thinking about how certain I was that she knew better than me. She always sounded so sure, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted us to have the life she promised." "Certainty and truth aren't the same," I said quietly. "Certainty is often just fear that learned how to talk." He gave a sad laugh. "You used to say things like that when I was a kid." I'd roll my eyes. "And now? Now it sounds like scripture." I smiled, though it felt fragile. "What's in the box?" He pushed it toward me. "The documents. Everything we took from here. The trust, the bank records, the paperwork she forged. I want you to have it all back." I lifted the lid. The papers were neatly stacked, each page a fragment of what they had tried to build on deceit. Beneath them was the pen she'd used, the one that gleamed like a piece of jewelry the night she asked me to sign. It no longer shined. "Thank you," I said. "This belongs here." "I'm sorry, Mom," his voice broke slightly. "For all of it. For letting her talk me into things I didn't understand. For not seeing what she was doing to you." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I forgive you, Daniel." He looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "Just like that?" "Forgiveness isn't a transaction," I said. "It's a choice. It doesn't erase what happened, but it ends what could keep happening. You still have to live better. But yes, I forgive you." He nodded slowly, his eyes wet. "I don't deserve it." "That's the point. None of us ever do. That's why it works." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked in the background, marking time the way it always had. Finally, he exhaled, a long, heavy breath that seemed to release years of pride. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a while," he said. "Try to figure out what comes next." "Take your time," I said. "Time is kinder when you meet it halfway." He stood and looked around the kitchen, as if seeing it for the first time. The chipped tile, the faded curtains, the ordinary comfort of the place he'd once called home. "I forgot how much I missed this house," he said. "It feels like the only thing that never lied to me." When he left, the air in the house shifted again, lighter somehow. I went to the sink and washed the single cup he'd used. The sound of running water filled the quiet, steady and soft. That afternoon, the mail arrived. Another envelope from the pension office. This one was shorter. "Reinstatement of account. Disbursements resumed." It felt final. I placed it beside my notebook. I spent the evening sorting through the box he'd brought. Some pages I kept for record. Others I burned in the fireplace, watching the flames curl around the lies until they were ash. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because every story needs an ending, even the painful ones. When the fire went out, I sat with the ashes and wrote, Lesson 6. Justice is not revenge. It is the quiet return of balance. Outside, the first drops of rain began again, soft against the roof. I imagined Vanessa somewhere in a gray room, rehearsing the choices that had led her there. Perhaps she would learn what I had taught my students, that truth will wait for you, but it will not beg. Before I went to bed, I walked to my husband's desk and placed the small sketch of the kite beside his photo. It felt like the right time to let him rest. The house was mine again, not just by law, but in spirit. The walls seemed to breathe easier. The clock on the mantel ticked, sure and patient, marking the start of a new rhythm. Tomorrow I would open the windows. Tomorrow I would bake again. Not to fill the air with memory, but to remind myself that peace is work worth doing. The storm outside gathered its voice. I closed my eyes and whispered into the sound. The lesson is over. The next morning I woke to sunlight. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in months, the light came through the windows without resistance, clean and forgiving. I made tea and took it out to the porch. The air smelled like new earth and lilac. Somewhere down the street, a child was laughing, a sound so pure it made me smile. The world felt still again. Not the stillness of loss or waiting, but the kind that follows after something hard has been faced and finished. I sat there for a long time, hands around my cup, thinking about everything that had happened and how quietly the truth had unfolded. When you live long enough, you stop believing that justice arrives with thunder. It comes softly, like morning light creeping over the floor, touching everything it needs to touch. Daniel came by that afternoon. His car door closed, with the slow sound of someone who didn't want to disturb the peace. He walked up the steps carrying a paper bag from the bakery in town. "Thought you might like something sweet," he said. "Always," I said, stepping aside so he could come in. He set the bag on the counter. Inside were 2 pastries, dusted with sugar, just the kind his father used to buy when the school year ended. We ate them at the table without talking much. It was a kind silence, the sort that mends rather than divides. He looked better. Still tired, but clearer. "The board called me," he said. "They wanted more details. I told them everything. I didn't leave anything out." "Good," I said. He hesitated. "They'll send someone to talk to me again next week. They said I might be needed as a witness." "Then you'll tell them what you told me," I said. "The truth doesn't have to change. It just has to stand still." He nodded. After a while, he looked toward the living room, toward his father's photograph on the mantel. "I've been thinking about Dad. I keep hearing his voice in my head, the way he'd clear his throat before saying something important." I smiled. "He's probably glad you're listening again." He blinked fast, then managed a small laugh. "Maybe he's finally proud of me." "He always was," I said. "He just wanted you to find your own way there." We sat quietly for a long time. When he left, he hugged me in that full way that belongs to children, not men. I held on, because there are moments you should never hurry. After he drove away, I walked through the house, touching the things that had survived the storm. The chair by the window, the photograph of the classroom on the last day of school, the shelf where my husband's books still leaned into each other for balance. I opened my notebook and turned to a blank page. For the first time in a while, my hand didn't tremble. Lesson 7, Forgiveness is not surrender. It is the quiet choice to stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. I closed the book and placed it beside the others. There were 7 lessons now. Enough for a lifetime. The phone rang once more that evening. It was Clara. Her voice was light, almost relieved. "Everything's finished, Evelyn." The board concluded the investigation. "The company's clearing your name in the records. You'll receive restitution for the pension. It's all settled." "That's good," I said. "And Vanessa? She accepted a plea deal. She'll serve time. It's not long, but it's enough to make the lesson stick." I thanked her and hung up. I sat back, letting the stillness of the house wrap around me. Outside, the willow moved in the evening breeze. Its branches swayed like slow waves, brushing the ground and lifting again. It had stood through every season of my life: weddings, birthdays, grief, and now this quiet reckoning. I stepped out into the yard and touched one of its low branches. The bark felt cool and smooth beneath my hand. When my husband planted it, he said it was a tree that knew how to bend without breaking. I had laughed then, not realizing he was describing the life we would share. Looking up now at the long green arms reaching toward the sky, I whispered, "We're still standing." The wind answered softly, rustling through the leaves like applause. Inside, I poured another cup of tea and sat at the table by the window. The sun was setting, casting warm gold across the floorboards. Everything looked peaceful in that light. I thought of my students, scattered across years and cities, living their own small stories. I wondered if any of them remembered my lessons, the ones written on the board in chalk. I hoped they did. I hoped they had learned that truth might fall silent for a while, but it never disappears. It waits for someone brave enough to open the door. In that moment, I understood that this house, this life, this quiet victory were all part of one long lesson, the kind that never fits on a test, but stays with you forever. I lifted my tea and a small toast to the empty chair across from me. "We made it," I said. The air felt lighter then, as if the house itself exhaled. The clock ticked softly on the mantel, the light dimmed, and somewhere inside that gentle hush, I felt my husband's voice again, steady, kind, and proud. "Trust the simple thing," he whispered. "People either keep faith or they do not." I smiled. "They learned love," I said softly. "At last they learned." And as evening settled fully over the house, I closed my eyes and let the peace take hold, knowing the lesson was complete. Sometimes the hardest lessons aren't the ones we teach others, but the ones life waits to teach us. If you've ever trusted someone who broke that trust, or found the strength to forgive anyway, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, if you believe in quiet justice, second chances, and the power of truth, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest lessons.